Hi folks, and welcome to the latest Railway Laser Lines How to Build series, and in this video we will be making our newest kit, which is the Immingham Fuelling Shed. And there's one that I've already made. Now in this particular video I won't be painting this due to lack of time and materials, so I'll be building this as is, but obviously we'll mention what needs to be painted as and when. So these are all the parts that come with this kit. I think there's about 73 parts, and I'll just quickly run through what you've got. So here you have your base floor. Just held the middle part in with some masking tape just for ease of transportations. You won't need that middle part, but it will come in handy for leaning against other parts to hold them in place when gluing. You have the walkways for the fueling strips, and then you have your mini versions of our fueling grids. So you've got your center strip and the two extension sides. Over here you have your side supports that go on the side of the roof supports and your roof cross members. You've got a couple of gutter strips, and you've got your 4 roof supports. They will come with another piece of wood over it and masking tape for secure transportation. You've got your end capping parts, your 2 roof corrugation parts, and then all the parts that fit to your roof supports to make the H-beams. So that's all the parts. You're going to need some glue. We recommend the Deluxe Materials glue, whether you use this one or rocket card glue or laser cut glue. It's entirely up to you. I've always used Superfatic and found it works very, very well. I've got a pot of water, got a paintbrush, got some cocktail sticks, the zippy blade, or you'll need a sharp knife, craft knife of some kind, and some tweezers, which you're definitely going to need to make these up. These are fiddly little buggers, and you're going to need some tweezers. So that's all the parts to this kit, so quite comprehensive. And then we'll move on and we'll show you what parts to start with. I will quickly show you this finished item. Now obviously one of the sides has a shorter side than the other. The other is a full side. That's how the shed is, and obviously then inside you've got your walkways, your rails, and your fueling grids. Now this kit is only for the new Pico Code 75 bullhead track. I've not tried it with normal Code 100 Code 75 track, but the fueling grids will only work with bullhead track. So if you haven't got bullhead track, you will need to obtain a piece of this. This Immingham shed has only been up at Immingham, I think, about 3 years, so it only really appeals to people who are doing modern stuff. So most people will have the latest bullhead track for that. You can always buy one strip and use it in there, and then join it up with normal Code 75 if you need to. So as you can see inside, it's grey, and on the outside it's red. I've used Rail Match DB Red, but again, you don't need to paint it in red if you don't want to. This could be used for any fueling shed. So that's a completed build. So we'll move on to the first part, which we'll do, and that is the fueling grids. So the fueling grids are just a smaller version of the normal fueling grid kits that we do for all the Pico track. On this particular case, the fueling doesn't go all the way down the end, so you'll need to add some ballast as per the prototype. So this is a mini fueling grid, and what you need to do is to get your zippy blade and cut out where it's tagged together. I'm going to add some engraved lines along here so you know where they are. Cut them out. Make sure you don't nick the edges. You might want to do it from the underside. Once you've taken all those pieces out, put them to one side, and we can take these pieces out as well, put them to one side, and then we'll make them up one at a time. These are really fiddly because obviously these parts here are quite thin and the material is extremely thin, so you are going to need a pair of tweezers. So I'll take all these pieces out and then we'll start the build of these. So we've removed all the parts from the template and you can dispose of those. So you'll have 3 parts for your center section, 6 parts for your outer extensions. So we need to, if you look carefully, you'll see the end part is slightly different each end, so you need to make sure that they match up, and you'll be turning it upside down and gluing underneath. So what you need to do is grab hold of this part, and I'm going to use a cocktail stick, and I just dab that cocktail stick in the glue and just run it along the edge of this part. Using your tweezers, we then place them inside these holes, and what I tend to do is when I've got hold of the tweezers and got hold of the part, I keep it there and hold it down, and then I move down to the next section, push it in, move it into the next section, etc, etc. These ones are fairly easy to put in. It's these little buggers that are hard, because obviously this piece here is most probably what, 3 mil, 2 mil wide, and you've got a 0.5 mil notch, and you'll see exactly the same except on the extension ones. The larger side will go into the outer edges at 90 degrees, so you'll need to glue again on the tops and make sure they fit along the edge and go into the notches. This small piece here literally goes into the center, or not quite center, holes, and on the edge, and again at 90 degrees. These rest on your sleepers. This one here goes down the edge of the side of the sleepers. I hope that makes sense, but these are fiddly to put on, especially this little one. So just take your time, don't put too much glue, just say run it along the top, and if you've got too much on it, I just tend to get my finger and wipe all the way along the edge with my finger, because you're holding it on. So I'll add this one. There is another video on how to do these on the fueling grid, so if you really want to have a look at that, you can do. Very, very similar, but we're going to glue these, and I do these first because these really need to be left for a good few hours to dry, because obviously we need to paint them afterwards as well, but we can do that once we've finished them and they're dried, and we can crack on with the rest of the kit. But let's glue these together and I'll come back when they're done. So that's the center sections done. You'll find that when you grab these and push them into the holes, you should sort of like hear them little pop in, and push them in one at a time. And obviously then when you've done one, just add it to the side to make sure it's flush. And obviously if you have any excess glue along the edges, get your paintbrush, damp it slightly. Don't do it too wet, because this is our model board is like a card stroke MDF, and get it wet and it will expand. So just a very light damp brush just to get rid of any excess glue. Do both sides, and then that should be fine. You might find it slightly curves. That's not anything to worry about, and what I tend to do is just push it down, make sure it's all in, and that's done. And I'll leave that to one side, and then we'll crack on and do these. These are the fiddly bits. So it's literally adding your glue, a little bit, a tiny bit of glue on the end of your cocktail stick, rubbing it on the top, wiping any excess away, push them in the holes. Take your time on this one, especially these edge ones, because you've got to get it at 90 degrees and in the notches, and I'll show you when I've done mine. A small tip that I found is easiest is to do the inner parts on these first, and when you've glued the top part is to put it in this hole first. So with your tweezers you grabbed it and put it in this hole. You do need extremely good lighting to see these holes, and hold it there for about 10 seconds, and then move that one into the side slot and hold it there for a few seconds. You might need to then hold your finger on the bottom of the fuel grid so it doesn't move, and then gradually work your way up, pushing these in and then pushing it down. Hold it for a few seconds, move up to the next one, push it in, hold it for a few seconds, and then gradually work your way up. They then slot in a lot easier. They do slightly bow, but once you've got it in, again tip it on its side to make sure it's flat, and then you can just bend it slightly. This is very, very versatile stuff, this model board, so you can bend it and then allow that to dry. And then I've done the other one, so they're the easier ones. Now we've got to focus on doing the outer edge ones, and on these ones what I tend to do is with my cocktail stick, dab a little bit of glue, put this on its side, and then just add a bit of glue in each of those little notches, and then also on the top edge of this, and again work my way down from this end all the way to that end, and then put it up on its side to make sure that you've got it in as flush as possible. It's not the end of the world if it's not completely flush, because this is going against the side walkway, but ideally you want it to be as close as possible to the edge of this. So I'll glue those and I'll come back and show you when that's done. And there we have our fueling grid parts all made up. Need to put these to one side and allow these to dry for a good few hours. We don't want these coming apart. Once they're dry, obviously then we need to paint these, and I've used basically a matte black. I think I got this from Poundland, a spray of matte black paint. Can't remember how much it was. It wasn't £1, unfortunately. It was about £2.50, but it's a good can and it sprays really well. And I tend to paint the underside first, at about a 6-inch distance. Put them on a flat piece, make sure they don't blow away. Light sprays, you'll find it adheres to the motherboard really well. Allow that to dry for a couple of hours, then you can turn it over and paint the top. Allow that to dry again, so put them to one side once they're done. So we can move on with the build, and I would suggest that you move on to the roof supports and making those and gluing the associated beam parts to make them look like H-beams. You will find that your roof trusses come in a support, and it'll have a piece of wood on top held on by masking tape. Just undo that, remove these carefully. As you can see, these are extremely thin and fragile. There's not a lot to these, and you're going to need to work extremely careful when adding these side parts. Now take these all out, and then you can get rid of all those wooden bits. So you've got the 4 roof supports that you need. Now on the H-beam kit, you've got outer strips, inner strips, roof inners and roof outers. Now these are held in slightly. I think I did them on the ends, so you need to just put your zippy blade down in the ends. Now on one side you'll see that you've got a small piece of cladding that's like just over halfway. The other side is a full, so one side will have 4 cross members, the other side 3. So I'm not sure whether the camera will pick it up, there are some line marks down. It obviously goes along where the holes are as well, and these ones here are the ones for the 4-sided strip. This will show you where you add your side supports, glue them to, so you can try and get them as straight as possible. So these are the ones you need to put on the same side of each of these 4 supports, and then obviously these ones here are the ones that show 3 lines, and they need to go on the other side, and then add the roof ones as well. It'll make sense as I go along. So the first thing I'm going to do is add the side ones. So we need to do an outer and inner of each side. So there's 8 sides to do, hence you've got 4, 4, 4 and 4. So I'm going to take these out one at a time, glue them in. Obviously they glue onto the sides of the supports, and you can see there's little notches in them. Again, we'll use our cocktail stick, add a bit of glue to the sides of the roof supports, push these in place, and then make sure that they fit nicely. You can use an off piece of MDF or wood or whatever you want to make sure that they fit nicely. So let's take these out and we'll start the build on these. When you come to glue your motherboard H-beam sides, you'll notice that on one side of the roof truss, in the middle here, the notches near enough opposite each other, yet on the other side they are a distant apart. So it's this side where the notches are equal. You need to add the part on the outside section with the 4 lines, if that makes sense. So this one here has got 4 lines, and you'll see it tallies up with those holes. So just make sure that you get those correct. Otherwise, if you try to put this one on that side, the middle one won't match up, and you'll have to quickly pull it off and put it on that side. The side supports are in a different area on the real thing, so I'm trying to match it up as good as possible. So just reiterate, the side with the middle one that looks as though it's equal both sides is the one where you have the 4 lines, and when you come to glue this on, make sure that those external lines are showing on the outside, so that will allow you to then add your side supports and attach to those where those lines are. If you accidentally put them on the inner side, you won't know where to put your roof supports. So hopefully that makes sense. So we'll carry on and fit those. Right, so we've moved all our outer pieces, and we'll do those first. So the ones on the left are the ones with the 4s, the ones on the right are the ones with the 3s. So you need to make sure, so these are the ones with the 4 lines, you need to make sure that they go on the same side. So here I'm going to use on this right hand side of this one, I'll add the next one to the right hand side of this one, right hand side of the third one, right hand side of the fourth one. Make sense? Good. Then we'll use the other ones and we'll do the 4 to the left side outer. 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's do those and then we'll come back. So all I'm basically doing is I'm going to run a bead of glue down the side of the roof support, bring up the beam part, align it into the slots, make sure they fit nicely. And what I tend to do is I put these on the side like so, and then just push down, but not too hard, because obviously here in the corner is extremely thin. Don't snap it, otherwise you'll be getting or I'll be getting an email from you, can I have another set please? So just be careful, take your time on these. I've not broken one yet, so fingers crossed that won't be the case, but just take your time, and these things aren't too that bad to make. So right, let's add some glue and we'll build those. Another little tip here is obviously the casing that the roof supports came in, one of the tops, you can use this to literally put this on and then literally push it down, so it actually fits in those lugs nicely. So hence this bit might come in handy. Also, when you've got it in this position, it's wise to then just use damp brush to remove any excess glue, because obviously when you come to spray these, if you've got any blobs of glue that have come out from there, it will show up. So just put your finger on there, hold that in place, and then wipe any excess glue that you may have. But if you're using your cocktail stick and you're just dabbing down the side of the edge of the roof support, you're not actually using a huge amount of glue anyway, to be honest, so you shouldn't get too much of an overload of any glue, but if so, just wipe it away with a damp brush. Right, so we've done those. So the 4 line ones are on my right side, the 3 line sides are on the left hand side. You need to remember when you come to fit this inside the base to get them all the right way around. Now we need to then cut the inner supports out. The good news is that these are all exactly the same, so they will all fit exactly the same. So I've allowed these to dry for about 10 or 15 minutes. I can now add the inner sections of all these. I'll allow those to dry and then we'll come back and show you once that's done. So you'll see the holes are a slightly different position on the card, so you've got more card on the right hand side than the left hand side, so you know they only go one way. And obviously these are a little bit harder to add, so obviously I push them onto here, and then I'll use just a spare piece of MDF and push down on top. So what I'll try and do, and remember to add a tiny little piece in so you can use these. So just make sure they're in the right place, and then you can just check that they're flush, get rid of any excess glue, and then move on to the next one. So we've now completed the outer and inner beams. We now need to do the outer and inner roof beams. So do exactly the same as what we've done, and obviously we'll take the top 8 out, which are the inner supports. Obviously there's a little smaller room, and then we'll do the outer supports. Doesn't matter which way around you do it, but again, just duplicate what you've done here, And then once they're done, you can leave them to one side, allow them to dry, and then we'll need to prime them. So I'm going to add the rest of the roof parts on. I'll come back and show you when that's all done. Again, we can use this roof support packing piece to help us with the roof parts, because you can lay them down, push them down, and then just rub your paintbrush along either side to remove any excess glue. So as you can see, that's held in place quite nicely there. So again, use this piece to your advantage. So we've completed all our roof supports, and all that needs to be left of those is to prime them. Now obviously if you want to go to town, obviously you've got the holes where the supports have come through. Now if you want to, you can add a tiny bit of filler and then sand it down so it doesn't show. Obviously on the outside, on one side of the building, those aren't going to be shown. On the other side, where it's half of the kit, then the bottom one will be shown. So it's entirely up to you if you want to do those. And obviously underneath the roof may be seen, but on top of the roof won't be seen. It depends how far you want to go, but I think on that one, I don't think I can show. I actually did fill them, and I think it looks pretty much spot on. So I used a bit of ready-made polyfiller out of a tube, added it on, and then used my zippy blade to flatten the polyfiller, allowed it to dry, and then went over with some very fine sandpaper. The downside to using that and sandpapering is that you can destroy the model board, so you have to be very careful. So I would suggest, if you do want to fill the holes, is to prime these first in grey to give it a kind of bond, and then add some filler, then lightly sand it. So then if you are then sanding over the model board, you're sanding on top of the paint rather than the model board. It's entirely up to you, or you use a primer filler that might do the job as well. That's entirely up to you. But we then need to move on to the base floor. So with the base floor, I've removed the inner section that was just held in there for transport purposes, and you now need to add a piece of your bullhead track. So I've just got a small piece left over and trimmed it, and then you need to trim underneath to take off the webbing underneath so it goes over the edges, and you should find that there's an engrave area that the rails slot into so it fits flush. And obviously if you're building this on your layout, you've got your base, but obviously I'm not. So all I've done is I've added some masking tape on the back to stop the track from moving, because obviously I'm not building this on a layout. But if you're building it on a layout, you might want to do this and put it into position anyway. So we've done that, but obviously before we actually fit this all down, you need to prime your base. So prime your base, and also prime your two walk steps that would eventually go in here. And what you'll also need to do before you do any other building is to weather your base, because obviously once you've got all your supports in place and your roof and your side, you're not going to be able to get to it. So obviously that one I built is obviously all clean and pristine. There's no weathering done to it. So if you're going to add this to your layout, you need to prime it and then paint it, get your concrete effect however you want it, and then weather it. And obviously you need to paint the inner and outer areas of your rails as well. Obviously your fueling grids are going to go over this section here. You'll leave this part here, but obviously you'll be ballasting around that area anyway. So you do need to prime, paint and weather this base before you go any further. Obviously while you're priming all these parts, you could end up priming your roof supports, and obviously you'll have to just do one side to start off with, and then once they're dry, turn them over and do the other side. You've got your side supports, your roof supports and your gutter strips. They all need priming. Again, take them out of this templates, and I normally use some masking tape and just double side it over and just pop them on to keep them in place, because obviously these are fly all over the place when you start spraying. And you only need to prime 3 sides. So the side that's facing downwards doesn't need to be primed, and that's the part that you can do that fits outwards. that all this will then fit on, and it won't be visible anyway. And obviously you've got your model board end parts which need priming as well. Now if you are painting your kit in red, I suggest that you prime these outer parts in white and not grey, because you'll get a better red than if you use a grey primer. So, and obviously you've got your roof support, your roof, corrugated roof, that needs to be primed in grey, both top and underside. I suggest that you paint the underside first, not that it matters. Don't mask tape this down, because it's card, you'll pull it off and then you'll pull the card away and it will be horrible. I tend to use Tamiya masking tape for anything like that, and a very, very small amount, and that peels off nicely. But if you haven't got any Tamiya masking tape, just spray somewhere lightly, and hopefully if you spray lightly at an angle and from a distance, it won't blow away. Once you've got some paint on, it should stay in place. But anyway, you need to prime those parts, you need to prime those parts, you need to prime those parts, you need to prime the roof, and you need to prime that if you're going to do it in grey. Now the side panels, we need to glue all together first, so we will prime those a bit later, so you don't need to worry about those. But that's what we can do, we can go and prime it. Now obviously I'm not priming and painting this kit that I'm building, because I did that one, so everything I do here will obviously be non-primed and painted. So I'm going to put the fueling strips into position, glue those in, and then obviously I'll glue the walk strips in, and then we'll add the supports and move on from there. So we'll crack on. With your piece of track in place, we now need to add the center fueling grid. Now the end on the left has a ridge longer than the edge on the right, and I've found from the number of pre-production models that I did, this is how you fit it. So this goes to the left and this goes to the right, and you want it fitting flush, level with the indent here and the indent here. Now you may need to move some of your sleepers. The bull-edge track sleepers are pretty flimsy, but I have found that if I put it in and push down, it does fit into place nicely. Now ideally you want this glued in position. I'm not going to, most probably will actually glue it, but I just wanted to make sure that it fitted. But again, this will be painted in your particular case, but I'm not painting it in my case. But I might just add a bit of glue, add to the underside of the fueling strip parts that go on the sleepers, push it in place, hold it there for a few minutes and allow it to dry. So I'm going to take that back off and glue it and come back when that's done. Just reiterate how important it is to make sure that this fueling grid is level with these protrusions here, because this is where the external fuel grid sections will go, and you need this to be level. So if I put one in, basically, and show you, so that's locked in, you want the lines, grid lines, all to line up. So you might need to take some webbing off the underneath of some of these sleepers so you can move it around. Okay, don't glue it into place and find out that it doesn't match, because it will look silly. So just make sure, then obviously if you need to move it you can. Obviously I've got masking tape underneath mine, so I can't move mine because the sleepers are stuck on the masking tape. But if you've got yours on your layout and you haven't glued it down, you can probably maneuver this around so it actually fits, and then it fits in position. So once you've got it correct, then maybe you want to add a couple of dobs of glue just to stop anything from moving. But I'm going to take this bit back out again yet, because we still need to make sure this is in the right position. But just again reiterate that, make sure that that fueling grid lines up with the outer edges here and here, otherwise it's going to look silly. So once we're happy with the center grid, we can then add the extended fuel parts, and these will need to be glued as well. Now all I suggest is adding a bit of glue to this strip here, the center part, You can add some glue to the outside if you want to, but I personally wouldn't. I would just add it here, because then it's going to rest on top of the sleepers, and hopefully it should then fit just flush underneath the rail head. And obviously at the moment, because it's obviously a little bit bowed and I haven't glued it down, it's just protruding here slightly. But once that's glued down, you'll see that that is just slightly under the railhead, which is exactly what you want it. Again, glue this into position and it'll adhere to those sleepers and it'll stick in place. With the fueling grids in position and dried, our next job is to add the walkways, and they just literally glue into position on the top, right up, butting up against the fuel extensions, and they fit perfectly on the ends. Just make sure that you've got enough room to add your roof supports when they go in. If not, you've done something wrong. But I'm going to glue these two in position and then we'll come back. Now that we have the walkways in place, we need to add our roof supports, and here is a reminder to remember that you need to have the same sides going on your roof support. So on my right hand side, I've got the edges that have the 4 lines, because this side's going to have 4 supports and the other line's going to have 3. So I've made sure these are all the same side, and I'm going to make sure they all fit in the correct holes. I'm not going to glue these in position simply because I want to make sure that when I add the roof side supports and cross members is that they are all accurate and I can allow a bit of movement. Ideally, when they glue into position, they should all be the same size, but I'm just going to make sure that if we have to compensate for any movement, that it's not going to go anywhere once it's plugged in. So you can glue it if you want, but I will most probably end up gluing it from underneath once I'm happy that they're all in the right position. So I'm just going to add the roof supports, ready for adding some roof members and side supports. So I placed the roof trusses in position. Obviously you'll notice they wobble quite a lot, so we need to add some support, which we'll be getting from the sides and the roof. Now I'm going to do the roof cross members first. Now obviously you would have taken these out and primed them, and you'd have had some primer on 3 of the sides. Now the side that you've most probably put down at the bottom is the side that hasn't got any paint on, is the side that when you bring it up to the roof needs to be facing upwards, because we will be adding the corrugated card roof on top, so it won't be visible, but underneath you will need to make sure that you see the paint. So the side that's not painted needs to be facing you, and we'll use the areas of where the holes are for each of the support to add these roof trusses. So I will add a little bit of glue inside on top of these holes and then put this into position, and then what I'll do is I've got some pegs, wooden pegs I've got them from the pound shop, and these were I think £1, had them a long time, and literally I'm going to position them into position and hold it in place. Add it then to the end one so it's level, so we then know that is the correct part side of the part. We then need to make sure that we get these as vertical as possible for when we come to add the side supports. You don't want them being pissed. We want to make sure, so obviously then we can push it down, and again we can add a peg into position like so and hold it. So I'm going to glue it, and I'll add the pegs and I'll come back and show you when I've done this particular one, and most probably add another one. So we're going to add 3 on each side. Now you'll see that obviously the holes are, there's only 2, so we can add them in those, and then we'll just play it by ear and add some glue in the middle and do a rough middle join between the 2. But I'm going to add the top one and then the bottom one, allow those to dry, and then I'm going to add them on the other side to make sure that we've got the same distance. Once they're done, then we'll add the middle one. So it should make all sense when I come back and show you. Now you'll find when you come to add this one here near the edge is because it goes over the holes, there's no room for the peg to latch on because the support strap down is in the way. So you're going to need to hold your fingers on there and keep it in position, line it up with the edges and just make sure it's in the correct position, hold it there for a few minutes and allow it to dry, and then repeat on the other side. Now we have the roof cross members fitted in place. That gives a little bit more rigidity, so we now need to move on and do the side supports. And obviously you would have taken these out and primed on 3 sides, and again the non-primed side will be on the side here facing outwards because it won't be seen once the corrugated or cladding, should I say, rather than corrugated, is added. And also you need to remember which side is your 4 and which side is your 3. Don't get that mixed up. You'll see your notches on the side. So I'm going to take these out of the template and then we'll glue them into position in the correct places where the engraved lines are on the model board. Again, I'll add the pegs to keep them in position while it dries, and that should then hopefully give it a really strong shell, ready to add the side cladding and the roof. So we've completed all the supports. We've got 4 this side, and we've got 3 the other side, and 3 on each side of the roof. So that's now done. We can put that to one side, and then we can move on to the side cladding. Now, side cladding has 6 pieces, and you'll see that there is a duplicate side piece for both sides. I can move these apart, and what we need to do is, this is the center section, and we're going to be gluing one of these to one side and the other to the other side to give a double-sided cladding effect. Now this on the back, we can add some light parts of glue, stick it on top, make sure it's lined up. The best way to do that is to hold it up and to line it up from the bottom and work your way up with your fingers and get it in position. Allow that to dry and then do the other side. Make sure that they are exactly the same, although I think I've done them the same thickness top and bottom, so yes, so you don't have to worry about that, and allow them to dry. Once they are dry, they will then need to be primed. Now if you're going to go down the route of having it in the DB red, you need to prime one side in white, which the red side will go on, and then the other side will be in grey, which will be the same as what I've done in that one there. So internally it's grey, externally it's red, but again white primer works best with the red. So first thing to do is to glue these panels together using light strokes of glue on some of these. That's on all of them, and if you get any excess glue, again wipe off with a wet brush. Just make sure that the outside ones are done and stick it in position. Allow it to dry thoroughly before adding the other side. So I'll do that one and I'll come back when that's completed. So we've completed one side of the card. I'm going to allow this to dry because obviously card can bow, and when you're gluing the underside of your card, I'm literally doing most probably every 2 or 3 strips. You don't need it on every one, and then just I'll run a bead of glue along the edges lightly. I'm still using the superfatic glue, and then literally putting it up against the side, and you'll see it's not going anywhere. And once you've done your primer, you should find that it all bonds in nicely. If you ever find that it comes apart, you can always run your bead of glue on this side, a light strokes, and it will seal down. But I didn't find that I had to do that on that one. So every couple will be fine, but you do have to work quite quickly with this superfatic glue. It can dry quite quickly. But I'm going to allow that to dry for a good hour, and then I'll come back and then we'll glue the other parts on the other side, and then allow that to dry before adding it to the framework. So both sides have now been cladded. It's nice and flat. I've laid it down and put a few weights on it to allow it to dry. Obviously you need to paint yours, and I would also recommend, once you've painted it, is to then give it a top coat of a matte varnish to seal it all in. It will give it a nicer finish, plus it will stop possibly any of these from seeping up if you hadn't got any glue on them. So that's what I did on that one there, and it's give it a nice matte effect, so that's worth doing. So I'm going to be gluing these to the framework, and obviously the 3-panel one goes on this side, the 4-panel goes on the other side. But before I do that, I'm going to add the roof panels. It's easier to add the roof first and then butt this up to underneath the roof rather than do it the other way around. So I'm going to add a bead of glue along the 6 runners, put the roof panels on. Now I'll match them up to the lines at the top of the roof supports and hopefully get that spot on, and then allow that to dry, and then we'll add the side panels on. So we're simply running a bead of glue with a brush all the way down these 3 support strips and 4 support strips on the other side, and then we'll literally grab hold of the piece of cladding and then butt it up against the underneath of the roof, making sure that it fits below this strip. If you put it in the right place, it will do. And then hold it in position, allow it to dry, and then we can move on to the next step, and the final step nearly, by adding the end cappings. So once you've completed your side cladding, we need to add the end cappings. Now again, mentioned earlier, if you're doing this in the DB red, you'll need to prime these in white and then paint them red. Otherwise the red just goes too dark if you do it on a grey primer. And then they need to be glued to the outer side, and they will hide the gaps between the edge of the inner I-beam and the outer cladding, and also up on the roof. Now if you've got any of your roof cross members or side supports just slightly protruding out, this is the opportunity just to get your zippy blade or knife and just trim them slightly, so when you come to put your nice piece of trim on, it fits nicely and you can glue it against there. So I'll just double check to see if any need trimming, and then I'll glue these in place, and then we'll come back. So we need to paint the gutter strips, and ideally these want to be painted black. So give these a coat of matte black and then stick them on the sides. I would suggest that it's about, I think it's about 3.5 mil by 2 mil. The 3.5 mil width ways should go horizontally against the back side of the cladding to make it look like a gutter, and then you can add some round downpipe if you want to. I actually think this building's got a square downpipe, so it doesn't, I could add a bit of MDF and include that in the kit as well, to be honest. But they need to be painted and glued in place, so I'll do that and I'll come back and show you when I've done that. The only thing missing from the kit that I forgot is the roof apex capping, so that will be included in your kit, and obviously you'll need to paint that and glue that on. But for the purpose of doing this video, I needed to crack on and get this done this weekend, otherwise it's not going to get done. You should find on this full side you've got about 1 mil gap at the bottom, which is correct, because where you have the edge of your inner footpath, ideally the ballast should go in there and underneath as well, because you ideally want to be covering this base. Might be able to see it better from inside this one. So the right hand side of the walkway is your ballast, and it will go through, and then obviously when you've got your track out here, you'll be adding ballast or earth or whatever, so it should cover it all up. So hence why there is a gap on that side. Just remember to trim the edges for the end cappings, and as you can see, there we go, that's a completed one, albeit not painted, which does look kind of crazy, but we do make them to put in the shop at DCC Train Automation, sometimes without being painted, just to show people what the kit's like. I'll most probably try and bring the painted one to Gets if I get a chance. So that completes the video on how to build the Immingham service shed. Any questions or queries, please don't hesitate to get hold of me via the Facebook Railway Laser Lines page messenger, or you can contact us on our website at railwaylaserlines.co.uk using the contact form. Thanks very much for watching. Happy building, happy modelling, and we'll see you very soon with a new kit. Take care. Bye bye for now.